Alright everyone, it's now being reported that Trump has already begun the process of amalgamating a significant cash total for the 2020 election. I guess he's decided he needs to think ahead. I'm wondering if some of this fundraising isn't going to be dispensed over the midterms, though. What could happen? If it looks like the Republicans are going to lose a couple seats in the Senate and thus that flips, I think that the party is going to tell Trump, loosen your purse strings a little bit, prop up a few of these races, wash our back so that we can continue washing yours. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter what happens in 2020. I'm still predicting the Democrats at best eke out a very, very small number of gains in the midterm, so that may or may not happen. Probably a couple seats in the House, maybe a governor's seat. For them, that would be a major loss because they're expecting to roar back to life and have a supermajority in the House and Senate, and then they'll impeach horrible, evil, Nacho Hitler Trump and all this stuff that's probably not going to happen. But it looks like he's raised almost several tens of millions of dollars, and that largely it's coming from grassroots sources. Now this, it's archived, of course. This is from the New York Times. So you'd think they wouldn't want to actually talk about the fact that most of his donations are still coming from small individuals, the small business owner, the sous chef or something like that, not coming from a bunch of billionaires. Largely the Republican donor base is still shied off of Trump. They still don't want to very visibly back him because I think they still haven't realized he's sane. Some of these people, I guess they were basing their analysis of the last election and what would happen if Trump won on what they heard from like the Washington Post or something like that, and they actually still think that he's nuts, which of course is ridiculous if you look at what he's doing. His so-called broken campaign promises are little more than a rephrasing of things he already kind of said. People, in many cases, took it, spun it around in the media so long, people came to believe he was speaking of something entirely different. It's like NATO, when they claimed he wanted to dismantle it. They're calling that a broken campaign promise. He never said he wanted to dismantle NATO. He said he wanted to reform it. Now he says, well, it's not obsolete, but he's holding to the fact that it needs to be refocused. Well, that's what he was saying to begin with. That's not a broken campaign promise. It's not Trump changing his mind. It's the media finally coming to terms with the fact that he's not actually nuts and doesn't want to dismantle NATO because it was a myth they themselves created in the first place. Therein lies your problem with yellow journalism, I guess. But it's fairly impressive that he's already got like almost 20 million on hand from grassroots donations. And he's only a third of the way through his first year. If that keeps up, he's going to be sitting pretty and probably won't really need to do any fundraising in 2020, which is probably his goal. See, Trump during this election did very little other than sell some merchandise and make a couple of adverts in order to prop up an actual fundraising apparatus. All the other Republicans ran around like chickens with their heads cut off, worried about shortfalls in the money that they would need, especially in like the last month of the election. Oh, we're going to be outraised and outspent 10-1 through the whole election. How can we possibly weather this? And of course, largely they pulled off a major victory. They're gaining governor's seats. They didn't lose the Senate. Trump did just fine, cracked the Rust Belt, and won, despite being outraised and outspent. Even at the end, it was, I think, 3-1. So it's obvious his style of campaign, and if the other Republicans can adopt this, they'll do just fine, during the midterms and in 2020. They can make do with a lot less fundraising than they have typically had. I can remember, I think it was back in the Bush era, they used to talk about, oh, these Democrats, they keep outraising the Republicans. If this trend continues, we'll never win another election again. Here's Trump again, 3-1, and yet he still ends up decimating his opponent in the Rust Belt. So there you go. That's all he needs. Yes, you do need some fundraising, but if you keep it grassroots, you're going to have some people who will give you more respect for that. One of the big lines of the Democratic Party for more than a decade now is the Republicans suck corporate cock. We don't suck corporate cock. Now, that's a total fantasy. They were sucking the same corporate cock through a totally different set of companies and banks and stuff. It just happened to be different companies they were sucking up to. Most of the major fundraisers for political campaigns, you look at the top 10, I think it was 8 of them donated almost entirely to Democrats. So that was always a myth, but it was a good political ploy to convince people that it was true. They can't really do that with Trump. They'd have to find some, oh, this mining magnate signed a $25,000 check to Trump. He's obviously in bed with this mining magnate or something like that. It just doesn't work. The line that the Democrats have been spewing about, we're for the people, you know, Hail Marx sort of crap, and the Republicans, they're all fat, big-bellied Republicans, and they take all this great big corporate cash. It stopped being true even in the slightest with Trump. You know, what before had been sort of a lopsided argument where the Democrats were actually the ones getting more corporate cash than the Republicans has turned into they're the only ones that were getting the corporate cash in the last election. And Trump is still not taking largely that corporate cash. Still getting primarily, I think it was 17 million just in grassroots support for the first few months of this year. If that trend continues, he'll probably have a couple $100 million on hand to spend once the election begins. And he won't have to say, oh yeah, you know, I sucked off the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and I sucked off that banker, and I bent over and got a steam load on me from this grocery store chain owner and stuff like that. The business donations he is fielding are coming from like some fucking mom and pop store, some local chain. Yeah, we own 3 stores. Yeah, we're a corporation now. We're hitting the big time. We're building a 4th store somewhere out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada or something. That's where his money's coming from. And that's actually one of his more commendable features. The fact that he doesn't feel the need, he doesn't, especially as a Republican, he doesn't feel a compulsion to take tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars from a bunch of bankers and from like automotive companies and stuff, is actually an asset. In a political sense, it gets that monkey off of his back, which no Republican has had the advantage of in a generation. Gets the monkey off his back, and it also gives some people something positive to say about him. Well, he's not taking the corporate money. The Democrats are. They're going to have to suck corporate cock twice as hard. They're going to have to suck up even more because they're still failing. Supposedly Trump's such a miserable failure, such a horrible human being, and they still haven't destroyed him. Well, what gives? I thought it would be easy, just like Clinton winning would be easy. Just like Trump not winning the primaries would be easy. You keep spinning these retarded Democratic mythologies, casting them off through the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever is real, and they never come true. And then your fan base is so demoralized, so totally let down when it doesn't come true, they don't even know what to do with themselves. You don't even have, really yet, a viable Democrat to put up against Trump in 2020. You still haven't discovered who your next ape in the jungle is going to be. Who's going to be the next Hillary Clinton that has to get up there and pretend that she cares about the poor or knows what it's like to be poor? Who's the next retard that you're going to nominate? Now, hopefully the Democratic Party gets so absolutely ass-blasted, so ground under, so demoralized, that they actually reform as a party, become worth voting for, and field candidates that make half a bit of sense. But if they keep the Pelosi's and the Feinsteins and the Reids and all these other idiots, it's never going to happen. A bunch of crazy war-hawking neoliberals who take big banker money. And that's really not a winning strategy. Trump would win in 2020. The Republicans will do fine in the midterms. Democrats, if they make any gains at all, it'll be so mild nobody will even notice. Oh, he won 1 House seat. Oh, wait, that still means that we are severe underdogs. What happens if the Republicans really do get a midterm boost? Another kind of mythology that people keep talking about because they just looked at the Tea Party uprising. What happens if the Republicans, gain 10 House seats and half a dozen in the Senate and a couple more governor seats? You do realize that means they can, pass constitutional amendments. They'd have support at the state and within the legislature. They'd do whatever they wanted. You're very, very close to that right now, and Trump's probably, over the next couple of years, going to get another Supreme Court justice. And it's probably going to be one of the 2 really old far-left justices. It'll probably be Ginsburg. Her mind has begun to go. How much longer is she going to be alive? So you'd better hope that now that you've got the nuclear option invoked in the Senate, that Trump decides not to push you too far and says, okay, we'll get a centrist on the Supreme Court, another moderate. Which would be the same thing as having either far left or far right. I've already explained. It's a tyranny of the moderates. But it's better than, setting the Democratic Party into such uproar you've got riots in the streets, I guess. It'd probably be a female justice, too. You just watch. He's good with such strategies. Gorsuch was chosen because he was basically the same thing as Scalia, to keep the balance of the court intact. Now, I don't think he'd stack it with a far-right justice. He will probably go far-right on guns. He's actually still talking about that. That's another thing that Trump has done that I actually deeply commend. I can think what I want about striking Syria, CIA black sites, his sort of pulling back on the idea of the wall, although the mass deportation of criminal illegals is still ongoing. So it's even or, but it doesn't solve the long-term problem. He needs to do something about the border. I think his defense of the Second Amendment goes well beyond what we've seen from the neocons. Their line was always, oh, we don't want more gun control. His line is, I want less than already exists. Good. No wonder the NRA loves him so much. You'll keep them aboard. That alone, that one issue, will keep the far right on board with Trump. And he knows that. That plus at least talking about the wall once in a while and then blaming the other Republicans for not funding it. That's about all. Peace out.